Hey, I'm Tim, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
Hey, good morning. I'm Matt. Well, maybe evening when you're watching this, but good morning to you. We greatly appreciate you tuning in and checking out this episode of the Mr. Maple Show. Today we're going to be bringing one of our favorite Japanese maples to you. Never heard us say that before either. One of our very favorites though, Acer palmatum Kurenai JISHI.
Also known as the red lion's head. This is a cool plant that gives you those twisting habits that you love of Shishigashira, the lion's head Japanese maple, with some red color. We had the privilege of going visiting Masayoshi Yano, who named this plant, which is Kurenai JISHI, or the deep red lion.
Yeah, I love this one. You know, it's often billed as the Shishigashira that's red, and it fits that perfectly, but this one would be almost equally at home in that Makawa family, or maybe even being considered like a red Hupp's dwarf. It kind of has that little bit of a twist to it. It's definitely a very unique red dwarf that is excellent here in the landscape. Now, we're actually here at Hillstone Arboretum, which is the home of Glenn and Vivian Hill. That's our aunt and uncle. And Glenn is a long-term rock mason with some amazing rock work around this place. And we've turned it into a little bit of a maple utopia. We use this as Hillstone Arboretum to showcase a lot of the Japanese maples that we do, and accompanied by his great rock work. So we're actually out here in mid-May, so you can kind of see the color pattern on this one. They're a little bit more fiery early, so you get a little bit more of that brighter red early on. We're actually here still in spring color, but holding on to a little darker color at this point. Now, late summer, this one can get a little bit more green. The fall color is actually really excellent as well. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that Shishigashira for the fall as well, because it has a more picked up orangey red in the fall.
Yeah, I think the fall color on Kurenai JISHI is underrated. Most people don't talk about it because they talk about it being the red lion and how unique it is for that. But it really has some nice bold oranges that really make this tree have some really great fall colors. The thing I like about this tree the most is the texture of the foliage. The twisting, curling foliage give this plant something very unique on a dwarf that stays relatively small with that tighter compact habit. This just really stands out in the landscape and garden and makes a great companion plant to something like the Shishigashira, or even plants that don't have that twisting leaf, because the texture is going to be so unique and so different.
Now, this one's a true dwarf and very compact habit, and because of that, it works well in so many different instances. We actually have this one in a small conifer garden here. It's actually accompanied by some other dwarf Japanese maples because it keeps a smaller overall stature, but it makes a great candidate for the container garden as well. You can easily do this one in a pot. Make sure your pot has good drainage on it. That's really the key. You know, the easiest way to grow Japanese maples is in the ground, but if you're gonna do it in the pot, make sure it has excellent drainage, and it makes a great candidate for container gardening.
Now, expert tip here, this one can grow in a variety of conditions, but if you grow this in morning sun, afternoon shade, I think that's the best growing condition. The reason being is because the brighter reds that this one is known for hold longer throughout the season, and with that afternoon shade, holds longer throughout the season. With that morning sun, it picks up the colors in this plant to really keep that color and look amazing in your garden.
With Shishigashira being always one of the most popular trees for bonsai, this would be a great candidate for a red accompaniment to that. So if you're into bonsai, maybe consider this one. I'd love to see an older bonsai of Kurenai JISHI. Just a really unique plant. You know, we had the honor of going and visiting Yano-san at World Maple Park, and he kind of took me and Tim around and was so gracious with his time and explaining different plants. And maybe we can get more into a video on that at some point, and maybe even some interviews with Yano, but that would be great. But just a really good friend of ours and someone who's always so gracious. I like to say that even before we got to go meet Yano, Tim and I would always have this contest to see who posted the picture that Yano liked on Facebook. So we would kind of be like, well, you know, I posted some photos today and Yano liked my photos. I don't think he liked yours. It was always kind of a contest to see whose photos Yano liked better.
And at World Maple Park, Yano has an amazing collection of plants, and this is one of the plants that he actually named. He put the name on of Kurenai JISHI, and it's such a poetic name that I love. A lot of the Japanese names are very poetic and just basically give the plant so much. Shishigashira was named because it had that ruffled type, almost lion type mane appearance to it. And this one continues with that tradition, with that twisting, curling foliage, with the JISHI, which means lion, and the Kurenai, which means deep red. And this one is such a cool plant. Typically a plant that's going to get about 4 to 5 feet in 10 years, so it is a slower grower. Makes a great container plant and an easy plant to put in smaller places in your garden.
It's a true dwarf, but as you can see when you get one with some size to it, they make a really majestic presence. I mean, a very fun plant, and an easy accompaniment to a Shishigashira. And if you've got a Shishigashira, you got to have this one out there in the landscape with it. But because of its darker overall tone, it looks great next to any light green Japanese maples or bright yellows. It's really going to show out next to any of those. You know, I would love to see this paired with something like Dragon Master for that bright yellow next to that dark red. But probably the most classic pairing would definitely be that Shishigashira. Now, it does fit very well, I would say, with like a Hupp's Dwarf style too. So it kind of fits almost in that Makawa family for its tightness. So you could pair this with any of the Makawa family plants as well. I mean, it's not in that family necessarily, but it fits very well with it.
I remember whenever we got this plant, we got it from Brian Upchurch. Him and Don Shadow and some other nurserymen brought this back in 2008 from Japan, and we were freaking out about it because it was so amazing and so awesome. And I think it's one of those plants that you'll freak out and love in your garden too, because that same excitement, every time you see this plant, it's so cool and so unique and so different.
It's interesting how you remember some of those plants, because that initial excitement too of like, have you seen this thing? Like, oh my gosh, I have to have it. And that excitement about learning about it and then wanting it and then finally obtaining it and then finally getting it available. So it was one of those things that took us a little while being a dwarf to get into production. But we've been offering this one probably since pretty early on. I mean,
yeah, and this is a plant that doesn't stay available long on Mr. Maple, although we try to make it available as much as possible. And so if you're going and checking out this video and you really want this plant, it's not available, go to mrmaple.com, type in Kurenai Jishi. That's in the video, the name's in the video. And
telling me, Tom.
Yeah, I know, right? And put that in the search bar. And then when you pull up the actual product page on our page, it'll have a notify me button. You click on that and then you put in your email. And when you do that, you'll be notified when this tree becomes available. And that's the best way to be notified first when this tree becomes available again. Also, make sure you sign up for our weekly emails on mrmaple.com. We had 10 new trees every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And when this tree gets listed, it's often, when it's in large quantities, through our 10 at 10 on Tuesday. And we often try to keep this tree in stock as much as possible, but it sells out really quickly. So when you see this tree available, don't wait. Adding it to your cart doesn't hold it. It's not until you check out. And I want to let people know about this because this is one of our most popular trees that we do, is the Kurenai Jishi, the red lion's head.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a future video. Matt, Tim, and Brian, Ramonji spelling bee. What do you think, Brian? Ramonji spelling bee. We'll go through I think I'd be in more trouble with the Latin names, honestly, but there's definitely some interesting ones out there. You know, we love this plant. Kurenai Jishi is one of the quintessential dwarf red Japanese maples. So if you're looking for a dwarf red to accompany many of your dwarf greens, don't overlook this one for sure. We hope you've enjoyed this quick look at Acer palmatum Kurenai Jishi. As always, this is the beginning of the conversation. You can let us know what cultivars you'd like to see future videos on in that comment section below. We've got a great community we're building there in that comment section. You know, always be courteous, but it's a great place to have discussions on Japanese maples, growing techniques and plants. And we definitely check that content out in search of future videos. So we love seeing that. And if we see a question that's commonly occurring, we're definitely going to try to catch it here on the Mr. Maple Show.
And if you want to share photos of your Kurenai Jishi, go to facebook.com and go to Mr. Maple Friends Group. And then share your photos of Kurenai Jishi in that group. People love it. People love, that's our online community on Facebook where you can get involved there as well and share photos of your Mr. Maple plants at Facebook and really get involved.
Thanks so much for watching.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day. So whether you're looking for a Kurenai Jishi or a Shishigashira, check out the guys at mrmaple.com. They do a mail order business that ships Japanese maples directly to you. And they produce from the largest selection of Japanese maples in the country. They do over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples. So check out mrmaple.com.
So I wanted to quickly jump over to my garden where I have a Kurenai Jishi planted next to a Shishigashira. Now this is in that Makawa Yetsubusa bed where I evaluate and grow many different types of Makawa Yetsubusas. But I had to have this pairing in this garden. So I've got the Shishigashira, which is going to be that, you know, really dark green this time of the year, paired with that Kurenai Jishi. So this is a little bit older Kurenai Jishi. I actually grafted on a standard with a really incredible look. It's got a little more spring color than the one that was in heavier shade, but just some nice colorations. And I really enjoy how Shishigashira and Kurenai Jishi pair off each other with the red lion and your typical lion's head. Just really nice pairing. I think it's, you know, especially as this one gets more size to it, it makes such a presence next to the Shishigashira.